I'm joined tonight by Michal Oshman, who is the author of a new book and a very successful book so far. Her book is called What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? Wow, that's a question that I think so many of us have asked ourselves. What would you do if you weren't afraid? So Michal Oshman writes this book, and in it she talks about her Jewish journey to a life with purpose and joy. Let me tell you a little about Michal before we say hello to her. We officially welcome her here. Michal Oshman is the head of company culture, diversity, and inclusion at the social media giant TikTok. If you haven't heard of it, I'm sure your kids did. Right? my daughter was like, wow, you're interviewing someone from TikTok? And formerly the international leadership at Facebook. She served as an officer in the IDF. Wow. And has 3 university degrees in psychology, sociology, and anthropology. Wow, welcome to this episode of In Conversation with Chana. I'm Chana Weisberg. Welcome, Michal.
Thank you, Chana. And I'm already so in conversation because I had a huge privilege of speaking with you 5 minutes before we started,
and before that, and I feel like we're
that. Of course, and you just what you said to me tonight just really touched my soul, your sensitivity. So I'm all in this conversation, and I'm going to keep things real. It is 1 a.m. in London. I do have a young baby here, girl. Of course, waking up the moment we jumped on the call, as they always do. But we're going to keep everything real and be in the moment, and I'm excited.
If she wakes up again, you can have her join us, no problem.
Yeah.
One of the questions is, how do you do it also? But we'll get to that in a minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so for sure. So thank you so much for joining us. We feel very privileged that you're here with us. And we're very excited about your new book, What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? So Michal, you are a very successful person. As I just said, some of your bio, some of the things that you do. Not someone who we would usually associate with feelings of fear or anxiety. Can you tell us about that? Why do you have all this anxiety?
Well, I guess, the question is like, how do we define successful? If it's about what my LinkedIn profile looks like, then you can call me successful or achiever. And yes, I'm also all those things that you mentioned. But when you kind of look underneath and what was hiding behind these, I guess, degrees or achievements or you name it, was very deep, profound anxiety and fear. And actually, most of my life, until the age of 38, I really did suffer from everyday anxiety. I tried to treat it in every way I knew was possible, which is mainly therapy and medication. And I got to a stage at the age of 38. I was already a mother of 3 children, married, with a job, and I had so many things to be happy about. But inside, I wasn't. I was very fearful, and I mainly put the, I guess, blame on my condition to my childhood, to things that I've experienced in young age and things that I'd seen. And yes, they were difficult things, but they were in the past, and I wasn't able to progress with life. I would think I was living in the past rather than the present, and I was sad.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, what you just said is like, what the things that are on your bio are one thing, but that doesn't necessarily determine success. I think that's so true. And to me, I feel that you're such a successful woman because you really, not only because you wrote such a great book, and not only because you're doing all the things that you're doing, but because of the journey that you've taken, and the journey to finding your true self and your inner self, and to be true to yourself. That is really what, in my books, is the greatest degree of success, which is beautiful. But aside from that, you also have all this worldly success in terms of all the accomplishments, which are also difficult accomplishments that that you've accomplished in your life, which are amazing accomplishments. So I know you wrote in the book about your grandparents, and they had survived the Holocaust, including your grandmother Hannah, who jumped off the transport to Auschwitz, and how this was always in the background of your life. Did that contribute to you being full of fear? Do you feel that contributed?
I can make assumptions because for many, many years I thought that was that. And so I grew up next to my parents. So I still have memories of my grandmother screaming in the night, fearful that the Nazis will take me. And the way how they used to kind of really keep a lot of huge amounts of food in the house. And I also tell in the book how my grandmother had this really wish always to feed me chicken soup, like shove it in my throat. And like till today, just the smell of chicken soup, I know it's yummy, but I just cannot eat it. So of course I grew up on those memories. And also my father was the head forensic pathologist of Israel during a very, very difficult time. And I was very much exposed to that. So I guess death and fear was much more was life for me. And both of my grandparents also passed away one after the other when I was relatively young. So that was my baggage. I guess this is the reality that I was born into, and I'm sure it didn't help. But I also think that I was searching for something else as a child and as a young woman, and I there was no one there to guide me that there is something else apart from the things that I can see in myself, or maybe think that that I have a neshama.
Right.
And I remember when I went to therapy.
You wrote about how you grew up in a secular home in Tel Aviv and how you really never thought about your Jewish roots or your Jewish identity because it was just all around you. So what, and I think a lot of Israelis relate to that. It's just It's who you are. It's just, all around you. But then when you moved to the United Kingdom, to England, where you are right now, something changed. And you also speak about that light bulb moment that happened 7 years ago that got you interested in Judaism, and interested in Judaism specifically as a form of helping to your anxiety. Can you tell us a little about that?
Of course. So I grew up in Israel, a Tel Aviv girl, very respectful of being Jewish, but not practicing anything because my identity was very clear to me. I was Jewish, and in Israel or in Tel Aviv, when it's Yom Kippur, you feel Yom Kippur in the air. It's or Friday, just before Shabbat. Maybe we didn't call it that, but you can feel it. And just through school and education, you develop a very strong identity. First as an Israeli, and again, it depends where you live. But in how I was brought up as Jewish by, I guess, culturally, or I don't know how to define that. And when I moved to London about 17 years ago, I wasn't curious about my Judaism. I was more curious about making it in life and growing and being this kind of universal, person, which is also fine. But there was this moment, as I mentioned in the book, when I was 38 and I was in a very low place. And I felt so guilty to be in the low place because as I said, on the surface, and also not just on the surface, I had so much to celebrate. But inside, every day felt like a mission impossible to go through. And every moment I thought that something horrible is going to happen. And every decision was so heavy. Like if my child asked me to do something, I thought that something horrible was going to happen to them. And I thought that my husband is not going to be wanting to be with me. And I even developed at some point a bit of obsession about how I look. And I did a lot of too heavy anti-aging treatments. I just couldn't find something. And as I said, I went to therapy, and it took me to a stage of development, but it didn't take me to where I wanted to go. And I actually remember when I said to my therapist one day, I said, I feel like there's something else. Like I know we're revisiting all these memories and what my mother did to me or didn't do to me, or my daddy, Abba Sheli, did to me or didn't do. But like I know all these memories, and this term of unfinished business, I had these hard conversations with them, and I was angry with them, and I didn't speak to them, but like it didn't really heal me. And it was back then I called it Saturday. Now I call it Shabbat, but it was Saturday in the morning, which used to be the day when I was doing all my errands and my washing and my everything. And I just knew I was looking for something, but I didn't know what it was. And I Googled a few words. I Googled depression and anxiety. And for some reason, I Googled Judaism and joy. And the search result brought me to a Chabadnikit lady, to Dr. Kate Lowenthal. And because I was so needing help, I just emailed her out of the blue. I found her email address and I said, my name is Michal. I don't know who you are and you don't know who I am, but I need help. And it seems like you're researching the ideas of Judaism and faith connected to mental health. And can you help me? And
Wow.
that was the first door that opened towards an unknown world till then.
And what did she say to you that helped you?
Well, she was, and this is how beautiful it is that we can be sisters to each other as women, and regardless of where we are in the world or in our lives or our age, she said, do you know what? I live 10 minutes away from you, and like, what are the chances? So she met me for coffee, and I started talking with her about anti-aging, and I just did Botox, and she was like, I don't know what Botox is. And I said, and I came back from a Beyonce concert, and I don't know who Beyonce is. So like, it was obvious that we came. But then she told me about the Rabbi Melubavitch, which I only knew from, to be honest, posters on the way back from the airport, I think.
Right.
You know, I didn't have any connection in that way. And she told me when she went to the Rebbe, and I was just very curious about a person going to a Rebbe for advice. That's nothing that I'd ever done or considered doing in my life. And she was in this journey. She was considering if to continue to have children and become a mother to a bigger family, or to do, I think it was her PhD. And then I was very curious to know, because I'm also an achiever. And the Rebbe said, Gam v'gam. Like, you're doing both. Like, it was, there's no dilemma here. Of course you're doing both. And that was like a moment for me. Oh my gosh, there is this wisdom that will allow me to be all sorts of things, but maybe find something inside me that I've yet to touch or discover. And she also suggested that I go to a shiur, which is, again, something very strange for me. A shiur for me was something that I go to at school or university. But something inside me said, you know what? I'm going to the shiur.
Just for those who don't know, to translate. A lesson,
yes.
Right? So she said a lesson to go to what? A shiur?
She said, I think you should go to a lesson in Chassidut, and you should start reading maybe Tanya. And I was like, listen, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't think a lesson is something I need at the moment. And I work in town, and it's really not convenient for me to go back for the lesson. But you know what, Chana, how sometimes things just work out. Well, always they do. Sometimes we just don't know that they do. And I went to this shiur, to this lesson, to this Tanya shiur. And for the first time in my life, I heard, in a beautiful combination, I wish I remember exactly what part of the Tanya it is, but the words there were nitzotz and neshama and lev. And I couldn't stop crying for a few days from the moment I heard.
Translating that, just translating for those who don't know.
So neshama is soul, and nitzotz, I guess it's the sparkle and the connection. And I realized that I have a neshama. I realized that I have a soul, which I had no idea I had. And I realized that regardless of all the things that I had seen and experienced, my soul is as pure and as with all the potential that it has from this life and, you know, before. And it gave me huge amount of hope, and I felt it. And I know I'm quite lucky, because sometimes it takes a bit of time, but I think I was so ready for that discovery that when it arrived at the age of, I think I was 38 or 39, it was the moment. And it was another door that opened, and then many doors opened after that.
Wow, incredible. And how did that change your day-to-day life? Like, how did it affect it?
So again, because I love keeping things really honest and real, it wasn't a like boom transformation. Wow, this one moment I came back home, and it took a while. It took years, because
Michal, it's supposed to.
I know.
It wouldn't be real if it was just this one moment, right? For sure. It takes time to integrate and to become part of you. Absolutely. I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead. Yes,
No, but I'm glad it's taking time. And I never want, and in many ways, I never want it to end because I want my journey here to be long. So
absolutely.
I don't want to get there
It
wherever
doesn't
that there
end. The
is.
end when you're 6 feet under. That's the end.
So,
Absolutely. No, go ahead.
so it was the one thing that I did, I tried to educate myself. So listen, I said to myself, and I'm naturally, I'm a person that I find gold or diamond, using more Lubavitch, like I want that diamond, not on my ears, but like inside me. So I realized I discovered something here, but I had so much learning to do and so much educating. So I became quite a keen learner, as much as I could. I think I was just after giving birth or pregnant. I can't remember that timing exactly. No, I just had a baby then. And I bought every single book I could find on just scratching this, just starting to discover what is the Jewish wisdom, what is Chassidut, what is Lubavitch. And I actually mainly, until I discovered you, and a few other teachers, I mainly studied from men, which is also part of the reason I wanted to write the book, because I do think that there's a huge advantage of women connecting and teaching women, and because we really understand each other and we know what life is like from our perspective. But I educated myself, and then it became really interesting when I brought it home. So when it wasn't just in my head, but I brought it to my husband. So at that point, we are, I guess, together, I don't know, 13, 14 years. He married me he met me when I was a waitress in a Tel Aviv restaurant. He was a client. I was a very non-kosher restaurant, just to make it interesting. And, he signed up to this certain marriage, and I want to introduce new concepts, and I want to bring different things to the home. And that's actually one of the reasons that I have so much appreciation and respect to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but Chabad as a whole is the concept of Shalom Bayit, that, by the way, I also wasn't familiar with.
Right. So
I wasn't familiar with this idea at all.
So Shalom Bayit just means peace in the home, right? And what like I mean, you were navigating a lot here. Your husband probably did not. There was a lot of resistance, I'm sure, because you found this new way of living, but he wasn't on the same page necessarily as you. And how did you navigate it? How did you find a way to navigate it?
So I've always been very, I know I'm stating the obvious, very caring about the relationship and my marriage. I always wanted our marriage to be meaningful and deep, but I also, within my marriage, I was looking for meaning. We had a fulfilled marriage, but I knew we could do more. But going back to kind of the tachlis, the practicalities, he was very happy, my husband, that he could see me happier. He could see me curious. He could see that sparkle in my eyes, and he knew that side of me. He saw something was waking up. I think when it became a bit different and potentially challenging at moments, when I actually wanted to introduce concepts, the practical side, into our home. And, for example, Friday night used to be our Friday night out in town. So we used to come back very late at home. And by the way, when I started lighting Shabbat candles, I initially lit them in a very convenient time for me, which was any time going back from, our dates on Friday night. But you know what? Like, because I never saw anyone lighting Shabbat candles in my home. My Savta, Zichronah Levracha, she used to light, but I couldn't remember that. In my own family, now my sister is lighting and my mother, but we didn't have that before I started. So when I wanted to go a little bit faster, actually my friends in Chabad said, like, no, this is not the idea. It's not a marathon, like, it's not a race, sorry. It's not like how quick can you get to something. Wherever you go, it needs to be with your husband. And it saved me.
Rebbe was always very, very careful, in terms of when people would come to him and ask him if one was more advanced than the other. He was like, you have to be so careful in how you do it, and not to push him, but to influence him that he should want to do it. The Rebbe was always encouraging, especially women. He felt women could have that influence over their husbands in a kind way rather than being pushed, because there's always so much more resistance. So that sounds like what you're describing.
And it's the mindset, Hannah. It wasn't even just the practical things. My mind was, how are we doing this together as a unit? How am I not, complaining or disappointed? And of course I have the right to sometimes complain and disappoint. I mean, this is a marriage after all. But how do I do it? How do I do it with peace, with like a certain energy? And the moments that we were aligned were beautiful moments, because my husband came to this shift from wanting our children to have identity as Israeli kids and Jewish kids not raised in Israel. And we realized that when we live in the Gola, the diaspora, if we don't give them identity, they'll just grab, whatever is accessible. So I think I came to this initially from something, I guess, around, I guess emunah and I think my husband initially came to this from connection, and we met in the middle. We changed schools. It was a big shift to go from state schools to Jewish schools, but we did take it step by step, and I'm so grateful that we took the time, and we're still on a journey, of course, and as you said, we will continue to be, and it's been great.
How do your parents or your extended family relate to it? And are your children going along with it? Do they feel excited about it?
So our children, so Baruch Hashem, we have 4 children. We had 3 when we started this journey. So I have the youngest one who is now in there's a risk of her waking up as we're having this conversation. She was born into this. So it's funny how sometimes, she will be like the mashgicha, right? She's only 4, not even, but she's like, don't break this, do this. She's wired to this because she was born. But my older daughter, my teenage daughter, it was a big change for her. And she was used to being Saturday morning, when we call it Saturday, was the time when you were like unlimited iPad time. And again, we took it step by step, and we explained that we're doing it for them, and it's we're going to work with them on this, but this is where the family is going. But actually, we spent much more time on the spiritual than the what you can and can't do. That was almost like the side, that was like the ending bit. We spent a lot of time explaining, why is this important to us, and how it is helping us connect to who we are, and telling stories and bringing to life the concept. So I went to shiur, I studied something, I guess, in a very, in a lesson way, in the highest level. And then I remember driving back from the shiur, from the lesson, and saying, how am I going to bring this to my family? How am I going to take this super high, elevated Gdusha to my kitchen? How am I doing that? I spent a lot of time thinking about that. So for example, one of the things I love, and I do, but I'm not an expert in anything apart from my own personal life, and I will never say I am. But I think one of the big memories that I had is that I remember that I think it was the Rebbe that said that, we should end a letter or a conversation saying something nice. And please forgive me, the Alter Rebbe, not the Rebbe, but I have so much to learn.
No, the Rebbe always spoke about the point of positivity and saying things in positive ways.
And saying something nice. Yes. So I thought about, how can I bring this to our home? And at that point, my 2 eldest children were always arguing between them. Always arguing, not being kind to each other. And, and I was pulled into that as well. And as a mother, I remember, and I still do, but less than then, saying things that I wouldn't want to come out of my mouth. Just things I don't want to say, but in the moment I say them, and I thought to myself, how can we bring more of that positivity, that saying nice things, to our home? And when we started doing Kiddush, which again we didn't have in our homes when we grew up, my husband and I, we invented this thing called the compliments game, which means that we sit around the table, and after the meal, just before dessert, and there's a reason it's before dessert, just before dessert, we go around the table, and every child and parent says one nice thing about, the rest of the family members. And And my two eldest kids couldn't find anything nice to say to each other for months. And we had these awkward silence, and they were like, Ima, we can't do this. They were miserable, like, okay, we'll give up dessert. Just finish the meal. We can't find something nice. And I said, no, we will find nice things because there's so many beautiful things to say about each other. And of course, my husband and I said them more freely. And then slowly, we wired the children to look for the good things. And eventually now, I guess, 5 years into playing this game, the children during the week, they have the sensor of looking for good things about each other's behaviors and how they were to each other, because they know that there's going to be this moment in Shabbat table when they will be asked, there's going to be a stage for them to say a compliment, to pay a compliment. And I have to say, this game really, now the younger ones, if we don't do compliments game, they're like, we want the game. We want to get and we want to pay compliments. So I feel that a lot of my work is, how do I take these elevated, beautiful, but sometimes hard to bring down concepts to the everyday? And I guess it's also an endless journey.
I love that example. I think that's such a great example, because you're taking the concept, which is very theoretical. Like the Rebbe spoke so often about how our words have such an effect on somebody, and how it brings out, how it, makes tangible that quality. And it really brings out that quality when you verbalize it and when you say it. So that's like a very interesting concept, but it's kind of very an ideal, it's a very idealistic kind of idea. And here you're taking it and bringing it so down to earth in such a practical way that has affected your children in such a positive way. That's so beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I like that. I think we should all try that. We can try that at home. Usually they say, don't try that at home. This is like a try it at home idea.
Super safe. The worst thing you could do is someone's going to feel really, really good about themselves and life.
Right. Exactly. 100%. So it's interesting because in your book, you speak about how you incorrectly thought that your parents' love for you was conditional, and it was conditional on succeeding. And maybe that shaped you into being so determined to be this successful, outwardly successful individual. And you learned from the teachings of the Rebbe that self-esteem is something that's based on the neshama. How do you see that in that way? How do you see it as based on your soul and who you are? Because the Rebbe spoke so much about our unconditional love for God and our unconditional love for ourselves, and how God has unconditional love for us, irrespective of what we're at. And I know when we were chatting, you were saying how sometimes you thought, oh, because you're someone who's such a perfectionist and always likes to, do the right thing, and so, which is what makes you so successful. I think in the beginning of your journey, you were saying you would be like so upset that I did this wrong, or I made this mistake. And yet, when we remember that it's not about the mistakes, but it's about our connection to God and God's complete love, unconditional love for us, we can accept ourselves better as well as accepting other people better.
I just want to listen to you. I just want to listen to you because I think this perfectionism comes from anxiety, or at least in my sense, because I was afraid, I was anxious that I wouldn't be good enough, either daughter or anything really. And I think it didn't come from a healthy place. It came from fear. And I think I didn't grow up with bitachon. I don't know how to say bitachon in English, to be honest.
Well, it's faith, but it's so much more than faith, right? And it's also such a positive trust. A positive trust that God is there for you and is always going to be there for you, watching over you.
So I think I didn't grow up with roots. I kind of tried to really grow as a tree up, but I think the roots were missing, and it's okay. I spoke about this with my parents, and my parents did everything they could best on what they knew how to raise me. And we know that parents, you're a parent, your grandmother, I don't know if that's public knowledge. Unbelievable, but it is true.
It's the greatest thing, a grandparent stage, right?
I was shocked when I realized you were. It's huge compliments to you, of course. I went a long journey with my parents. We had very honest conversations. I do now understand, and of course, my children will have, I guess, things to say about me as they grow up and how I could have been a better mother, and I will accept that. But I think what I was really missing as a child was bitachon, was that solid, that grasp, that deep roots in something, which I guess when you were raised in a home with spirituality and chassidut and you know and a Chabad house, you know that whatever happens around, like you're never ever alone. And I felt alone a lot when I
You know,
grew up.
I think
And
even when you're raised with it, it's something that you have to work on. It's something that we all have to work on, you know, because the hiddenness in our world is just so strong that we don't feel that connection at all times, even if we have learned it in the shiur or learned it in the books. But to actually actualize that in our lives when we're going through something difficult is difficult. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, so it's that, and but how I would say almost lucky I am to discover what I was missing,
Hmm.
and that was there. I didn't have access to it. I didn't have guidance to it. I did not know that it is, but I can tell you, I felt it was it. I remember when I saw, and I tell about in the book, I saw, unfortunately, a lot of death in my life. And I remember when I saw through different reasons, a body a dead body when I was very young. And I remember feeling that there was something there, even if it was not there in the body any longer, but I felt that there was a neshama. But when I asked my father, is there anything apart from the body? He said, no, we're only flesh, because that's how he was raised.
Sure.
My parents were raised by kind of a survival mindset, and
Of course.
it was just a different upbringing. But now that I know that we have a neshama, now that I know that we're here for a purpose, I also have strength to know, I get strength to know that I was supposed to be my parents' daughter.
Hmm.
And I was supposed to be my sister's sibling, and I have a job to fulfill. And even this anxiety that I had, it also had a purpose. And I say in the book, at some point when I was doing therapy, I went to this coach, and he asked me, Michal, if you can cut this anxiety off your system completely, get rid of it, as if it was it's like someone with anxiety, you think like that's kind of a dream proposal to them. But it was the first time that someone asked me something like this. And after thinking about it very carefully, I said, don't take it from me. Don't take the anxiety. I knew the anxiety was a signal of something. I just did not know what it was, and I wasn't ready of getting rid of it. And I'm glad I didn't get rid of it, because I know it was my, I guess, soul signaling that I am not giving it what it needed. And I know it sounds very like angely. I'm not there. But I'm glad I didn't cut it off me, not that I could, and just continue to be curious about what is my soul trying to tell me here.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to read something that you wrote because I felt that it just touched me. So you write in your book, and then I realized the spark I felt inside of me, that something that I couldn't name or define wasn't anything to do with my upbringing, my experiences, or thoughts. It was my soul. And this image of a flame continually flickering, faltering, unceasingly trying to break free, but always being held down, made me look at my anxiety differently. My inner angst wasn't a disease, nor was it some irredeemable damage I had picked up in my childhood. So when I was reading that, it just struck me that this was the stirrings of such a sensitive soul, appreciating something so deep within yourself. And it reminded me, in one of his letters, the Rebbe actually explains that everybody, and I'm going to quote it, that everybody recognizes, I'm sorry, talking about juggling everything in our lives, right?
Of course.
Okay. Okay, I should have put that off. There we go. You wrote how the Rebbe writes there that everybody recognizes that anxiety has to do with the psyche, but in the case of a Jew, the so-called psyche isn't really is really the neshama. Some Jews have a particularly sensitive soul, in which case the above-mentioned disharmony would create a greater anxiety. So I think what you were really feeling, um, And elsewhere, the Rebbe said, what you have learned about your anxiety, what have you learned about your anxiety from the wisdom of these teachings? Like, what have you really, now that you understand more about yourself, what did that teach you about your own anxiety? Because to me, like seeing that was just so much. Your own inner anxiety was your neshama calling to you and saying to you, something needs to be done here. And how did that affect you?
I connected to different. So anxiety. When I started this book tour, one quite influential man in the Jewish community, he said, like, I'm sorry, I'm finding it really hard to believe your story because you have it all. Like, what's your problem, right? He didn't say it in those words, but that was the
But I can
subtext.
imagine, sure. I mean, here was this picture of success and perfection, absolutely.
But anxiety doesn't differentiate, like, race, age, what, I guess, economical like nothing. And whoever experiences, and there's of course a wide spectrum of anxiety and depression, and those two can be interlinked, and OCD and all those every day, but sometimes could be, acute and really doesn't allow us to function in life. I was highly functional, right? So I was this combination of extremely anxious and highly functional, as then I said, connected to each other, because I was so anxious to fail. I was even more highly functional, and I was killing myself, like,
right.
Every single day. And I felt low and I felt down. And when I read this about the Shema and this metaphor of a flame and a candle and this flickering up and wanting to go up, I realized that there is a world, like there is a higher place. I only thought that what I can see is what is here, or what is anywhere. You see, my mind, I didn't have that wider spectrum of the bria, I guess, of creation. And I think when I realized that, everything got opened up, and I could see things in a different way. And then I realized, and I also learned, Hannah, but these things don't just happen if I just, like, it doesn't happen like that. I prepared myself, I educated myself. So when I started lighting Shabbat candles, I used to read this text. I used to meditate on it. I used to say, I'm going to look into the candle. I'm going to look into myself through the candles. And I reminded myself that my Savta Chana, who did light Shabbat candles, and it's probably one of the only things that she has saved from that time, that she did, and her mother did it, and her mothers. I do come from a family that used to it. Just that chain kind of was a little bit cut for a period of time. And I said,
we
wow,
all like that chain, even if we look back enough, right? We all yes, absolutely.
But think about, I also felt less anxious because actually it was not all about me. I think for many years I put myself in the center of, like, my achievements, my face, my this, my that, with good intention, but you could get obsessed when you only think about yourself. Now that I'm realized that I'm something that is much bigger than me and much greater than me, that I actually can't control. And there's a much better plan than the one that I'm planning. Then there is this let go. And I think through this kind of let go, through doing my best, but knowing that Hashem will do the rest, it was a discovery. And I don't know whoever's listening now or will be listening to the recording. I mean, I know these concepts could sound so, high there, but up there, but like, we can take them down. We can bring them down. Practicing even one Chag. I realized that, I Google on Chabad.org before a Chag. I prepare myself. I come with a narrative. I'm ready. I really believe in being ready for spirituality. I don't think you can just enter, or I can't enter, shul on Shavuot and immediately feel something. I need to come ready, and I'm seeing huge benefit and joy from actually education.
Wow, that's beautiful. Really something. So when you feel this anxiety, do you ever wake up in the middle of the night feeling very anxious?
I used to, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Yeah, going back to the title of the book. another thing that I love about, the Rebbe and Chassidut is like every moment is an opportunity to overcome something. My Yetzer Hara, my ego, my fear. And sometimes I win and sometimes I lose. But even when I lose this momentarily battle, I know that I have a huge opportunity just in front of me in the next 5 minutes. So that was also a concept, a mindset shift for me, because I always thought if I get something wrong, it's done. Like I'm not going to be loved. I'm going to fail. I'm going to be rejected. So this acceptance that failure is part of the journey is also something that's really helping me. Even in the practical things, I guess you can call me like some sort of Baal Tshuva. I don't like putting myself in boxes. I actually never try not to put people in boxes.
That's
But
another thing we have in common. Okay.
So when you try to do something new that you've never done before,
Sure.
and you don't get it right, it
Mhm.
can be upsetting.
Mhm.
But I don't allow myself to, because I'm being upset for myself. Like God doesn't mean me to be upset,
Right.
and no one else does. So I'm not helping anyone. But there's a lot of self-talk, a lot of conversations go on here, and I also share a lot with my husband. When I feel like I'm going too far or too fast, or I'm judging myself too harshly, then I will share that with him or with my friends, and I will course correct and come
That's
back to
important
positivity.
to have that soundboard. Yes. Yes. Wow. Can you tell us a little about how you juggle everything as a mother, as a wife, as a businesswoman, as an, all the things that you're doing? You're writing this book now. You're doing all these speaking and tours for it. Like, how are you juggling it all? I'm sure a lot of women out there are wondering.
The same way that you do. The same way that you do. First of all, I think when you have a sense of shlichut, when you feel like you're doing something from deep, deep inside, and it could be anything, but that thing that gives you purpose, then you find the energy. But I'm not going to fake it. First of all, I have my moments like everyone else, but I think this is a special time personally in my life with the publication of the book, and hopefully I can do things meaningful in the world and for other women and men. I also think it's an interesting time for our nation, and actually connecting to ourselves and strengthening ourselves and healing ourselves and getting clarity and pride is also something that's giving me a lot of sense of purpose and direction. And also I am asking my children to help me. They're on the mission with me. I think we're all in this together. We're doing this together. We don't have a Bet Chabad, but the book is our Bet Chabad, I think, in a way. And I had this beautiful, listen, I also want to say all the things that I'm so not great at. So I don't know how to cook. Not that you care, but I don't know how to cook yet. I am not as involved as I like to be in my children's kind of formal education. I sometimes don't prioritize that at all. And I know that it's, and other things that I don't do. But I try to do the things that matter, and I try to be honest with them about it. And when I see these, one of my kids is he wants to be a rabbi, a footballer, and all sorts of other things. And you can see him like he thinks he can be all of those things. Well, he probably will be together. So I think it gives me so much, so much joy. So just energy for the day after, I guess.
Wow, beautiful. I want to quote another thing that you write in there. In my desperation to fix myself, I, like many others, had become so concerned with what I needed to get out of life that I had forgotten about what I had to give. I hadn't realized that just as I had a unique soul inside me, I also had a unique purpose. My job was not only to see what life could give me, but to see what I could give to others. What am I here to do? I found that so fascinating because the Rebbe always demanded of us, you did 10, do 20, you did 20, do 40. always doing more and more, and yet at the same time realizing the greatness of what we've done, realizing that what we've done is so great, and that's why we need to do more. So how do you see these strivings and feelings within you helping you with your spiritual mission? What do you see as your spiritual mission, and how do you see these feelings helping you with it?
So actually, this advice from the Rebbe really helped me, because I know that just the way I'm wired, or my neshama, I need to keep myself busy. It's really good for me to keep myself busy, and I think that's one of the reasons that I did lots of things, and busy with doing things, for others. And again, I discovered the concept of tzedakah. Of course, I knew the word before, but I think I was fascinated by learning that tzedakah is such a big part of our life, that we're that we're here to do good, and actually that tzedakah is it's tzedek, it's justice, it's actually doing the right thing. It's not like, oh, you're being kind, you're amazing. It's like, no, this is right. You're getting it right. Which again, such a mind-blowing concept. I mean, every concept is such a mind. We can talk about it forever. But just all of these things help me, take step by step to realize that I'm here to do something. And by the way, and this is also something I realized as a coach, because you mentioned that I worked for TikTok, and before that I worked for Facebook, and I've been working in the corporate world and in tech world for I don't know, 25 years, is that sometimes I work with leaders, and they're like these big leaders, and they do really big things, and successful, but when I ask them, so what's your purpose, and what's meaningful to you, they're like, I wish I knew. And it's such a shock sometimes to see people doing so much, but when you actually ask them what their purpose is, they don't know what to say. And so I really do care, also as a coach and as a leader in a workplace, but also at home, to help find my own purpose, and hopefully help others find their own purposes. But I also believe, Hannah, that it's not just a one capital P big bombastic purpose, because that's also scary, right? I feel like we have different purposes. I think when I was a first-time mom, I had a purpose. Maybe it was just to breastfeed, which I, by the way, failed miserably. And then after that would be something else was my purpose. And then maybe now is the book, is the mission and the messages and my purpose. And maybe in 10 years from now, I want to do, but just knowing that we have a purpose and looking for it, I think it's already 50%, like it's already the journey to finding it. And just even this is life-changing.
That's a great point. Especially as women, I find our lives are changing constantly. We're often remaking ourselves as we go through the stages of life, even more so than men. And I think that's a great point. Like, if you're just looking at that purpose, it's not the point of of knowing that there is a purpose at every stage, at every journey, every place that you stop, every place that you continue. There is a purpose and a mission that you have. And the purpose might just be waking up with a smile on your face one morning,
And even in marriage, like Absolutely. How marriage evolves, right? I feel like I can speak only for myself, but in the beginning of the marriage, the purpose was just to try, I don't know, agree that we're in this together. Because we were like, each of us had our swim lane, but we couldn't find the swimming pool, like the shared swimming pool. Sure. Like that was the purpose. And then after that was about, okay, you do giving space for each other. Like, and I also feel like, this purpose thing is in everything, and in how you are. My purpose now as a daughter is different to what my purpose was 10 years ago. Now as a daughter, I only want to accept my parents. I only want to love them. I want to let go of all sorts of things that are not needed. I want to celebrate that, Baruch Hashem, we went full circle and we forgave each other and we accepted each other, and all those tensions that we had, they're there, but they're in our history. They're not in our present. Like, that's a new purpose as a daughter, as well. And as a mother to now a teenager daughter, my purpose is help her navigate through social media, body image, her own persona. Like, it's a new purpose as a mom. So I think sometimes when I have friends asking me, so what's my purpose? What's our purpose? Like, I can't tell you what it is. the big capital P one, but I can maybe help you figure out what's meaningful to you now. Maybe that will help.
Absolutely.
So yeah, keeping it practical. I think just need to be helping ourselves with that.
Right, 100%. The Rebbe always said, "Hamaisa hu ha'ikar." It's the practicality that, it's like nice ideals, but when you bring it down to practice.
I love tachlis. I love
Exactly.
tachlis. And I love that everyone in Chabad talks tachlis.
Right.
So I love that.
Right. Michal, if you were to look back at yourself, look back at your younger self, is there something that you would say to yourself, knowing that what you know now, to that younger version of yourself?
That it's all going to make sense at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one.
It will. Yes, it's going to connect. And of course, Hannah, who I don't know anything. I don't, what do I know? I only know, but I can say in this moment, as a 45-year-old woman who is trying to live life meaningfully and had been in a very low place a few times in her life, a place that no one wants to get to, really, and no parent wants their child to get to, and no husband wants his wife to get to. If I just knew, if I had the bitachon, which I didn't have, that it's part of a much greater experience than, but you know what? If I knew it, I wouldn't go on the experience. So I wouldn't change a thing.
Right. It was all meant to be. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Michal. I'm here with Michal Oshman, who wrote a book that many of us ask ourselves, titled, "What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid?" So many of us are afraid. In today's society, especially, there is so much fear. Is there one parting message of one of the most inspirational or motivational teachings of the Rebbe that you'd like to share with us that you think that the world needs to hear right now?
There's so many inspirational messages, and maybe this wouldn't fall on the highest from the level of kedusha inspiration, but actually, because you said we live in the present, we live in the down, I actually think that I'm personally inspired by the Rebbe's, and also because I work for tech and for the Rebbe believed in progress and making sense and using everything for good, including technology. And when I discovered that even Chabad.org were one of the first ever websites to educate online, it did blow my mind. So, how can we bring the Kedusha, the Mashma'ut, the meaning, the Emunah to the day-to-day? And even through social media, how can we educate? I Google Chabad.org probably every other day when I look for something. The Rebbe's wisdom to know that society will evolve, things will progress. How do you work? Instead of arguing or fighting or trying to push back how do you work with the energy of life, but do something meaningful with it? I find that hugely inspirational. So inspiring. So yeah, for me, it's that means a lot to me. And I remind myself that in everything that I do, from the tachlis, whatever it is, I can bring the kedusha down to it, and it gives me strength.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you so much, Michal. Again, Michal is the author of What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? Michal Oshman. Her book is an amazing book. I started reading it and I couldn't put it down. It was just incredible. I loved it. And meeting the author in person, such a successful woman, and yet I love your vulnerability and your honesty and your humility. I think, that stands out along with your perfectionism. That's just what makes you so uniquely you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And Michal, I am sure that you and I are going to have lots of conversations in the future.
It's happening, and it will continue to happen. And I want to say so many things to you, compliments. I actually don't want to embarrass you, but what you said just before the call, and how just your sensitivity and your ability to just see into my soul today, exactly where I needed you to go. Thank you for being such a supporter and empowering women. It's a huge, huge role to play for regardless of where women are on the journey. Just to be that, sorry to use this word, I only know, like this chavera, right? This chavera, this friend, is so meaningful. So thank you, Hannah.
I wish you tremendous success. I just know you're going to be doing great stuff. it resonates with you. You know, it just is who you are. So I just wish you tremendous success on your journey forward, on your journey with this book, and on your journey and mission in general, because I think we're going to be hearing a lot from you, Michal. You're just
Oh my
someone
God.
very spectacular.
I'll do my best. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the people listening. Like, I know time is precious, and thank you for investing in listening to us today.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us at 2 in the morning, London time. And now I think your daughter wants you, right?
Yes, she's up.
Good night. Good night. Thank you so much for joining us. This is again In Conversation with Chana. Thank you all for joining us with Michal Oshman. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all. Thank you.